But let me be very, very clear. Chris Paul does not deserve that.
After 21 grueling seasons and 12 All-Star nods, the man walked away from the sport that defined him, but not on his own terms. It was what the Clippers pulled at 3 in the morning that flipped the script. That notification didn't just wake up NBA Twitter, it sent shockwaves through the entire league. On February 13th, 2026, one of the smartest floor generals to ever lace up a pair of sneakers finally decided he'd seen enough of the circus. Chris Paul, the point god himself, the architect who spent over 2 decades orchestrating basketball symphonies, officially clocked out for the last time. And when I say he walked away, don't picture a Kobe Bryant farewell tour with confetti and applause. He didn't fade into the sunset like a hero. No, sir. The end of the Chris Paul era was loud, it was messy, and frankly, it was a slap in the face to a guy with his resume. Now, hold on. Before we dissect the toxicity, the locker room drama, and that shady 3 a.m. dismissal that had basketball fans absolutely losing their minds on social media, we need to rewind the tape to really get why this retirement feels so wrong. You have to understand where CP3's head was at before the 2025-26 season even tipped off. Take it back to the summer of 25. Paul had just wrapped up a full 82-game grind with the San Antonio Spurs, silencing every critic who swore he was finished. At 39, he proved he could still run a team. The man wasn't washed, he wasn't cooked, he wasn't some broken-down relic collecting a paycheck just to wave a towel from the end of the bench. He still had gas in the tank, and the analytics backed it up. He was efficient, he was sharp, and he was ready. But here's the human side of the story that we often ignore when we're looking at box scores. Basketball was his job, but it wasn't his entire universe. His family, Jada, little Chris, Cameron, they were the real MVPs on his priority list, sitting right there at the number 1 spot. And after spending 6 straight years living out of a suitcase, bouncing around the map, from OKC to the desert in Phoenix, up to Golden State, and down to San Antonio, all while his wife and kids stayed rooted in Los Angeles, something finally snapped. You can only do the long-distance dad thing for so long before it starts to eat away at you. He knew the clock was ticking. He flat out said, "I just finished year 20, which is a miracle in itself. I've got 1 year left." Max, that quote right there, that's the key. That tells you exactly where Chris Paul's headspace was as he geared up for his final ride. Sitting down for an interview in July of 2025, he didn't mince words. He looked the camera dead in the lens and told the world, clear as day, that the hourglass was almost empty. Maybe one more season. "I've been in this league for more than half my life," he said. Think about that. Half my life. Let that marinate for a second. More than 50% of his time on this planet had been spent under the bright lights of the NBA. Since the moment the New Orleans Hornets drafted him 3rd overall way back in 2005, the game consumed him, the endless film study, the flights at 2 a.m., the pressure cooker moments, the rehab assignments, the weight of carrying franchises on his back. He lived that grind every single day for 20 consecutive years. And after 2 decades of giving his body, mind, and soul to the hardwood, he was finally ready to admit that the buzzer was about to sound. But let's be real, it wasn't just the physical mileage that was slowing him down. It wasn't just the ice baths and the soreness that comes when you're trying to guard 20-year-olds in your 40s. It was the emotional tax, the price of being separated from the people who actually matter when the cheering stops. He talked about the time you can't get back, the moments with your kids that vanish while you're on a road trip in Milwaukee. Those words hit different when you realize what Chris Paul actually gave up during those 6 years of wandering the league. We're talking 6 years of missed birthdays, 6 years of school plays, 6 years of not being there for Saturday morning cartoons and pancakes, 6 years where his grandmother back in North Carolina, the woman who watched every single dribble, no matter how late the game aired, had to settle for watching her grandson on a flat screen instead of giving him a hug. He got emotional talking about it. "My granny watches every night," he said, "but I miss those hugs." You could hear the fatigue in his voice. The man was tired of missing out on life. So, when free agency hit and Chris Paul was officially on the market, there was really only one play left in the playbook. It had to be the Clippers. It was the only move that made sense. He signed a 1-year deal with the Los Angeles Clippers, the franchise he put on the map during the Lob City era from 2011 to 2017. The team located in the exact same city where his family had been waiting for him for 6 long, lonely years. On paper, it was the perfect Hollywood ending, a fairy tale script for a legendary career. A homecoming king returning to his castle, ready to take a final bow in front of the fans who worshipped him, finally reunited with his wife and kids. But when reporters asked him point blank about the pressure, the mood shifted. As for the game plan, where he was actually going to suit up next, even Chris Paul, the guy who usually sees 3 plays ahead, didn't have an answer. I honestly don't know, he admitted, sounding less like a Hall of Famer and more like a rookie at orientation. Seriously, I don't. I really don't. It's actually a weird spot to be in because for my entire career, I've pretty much always known the play before it happened. Think about that for a second. We're talking about a man who built a legendary resume on absolute suffocating control. This is the guy who knows exactly where all 9 other players on the court are supposed to be standing down to the inch at every single moment of every single possession. He orchestrates offenses with the steady hand of a surgeon and the creative flair of an artist. So, hearing him admit he was flying blind, that he didn't have a clue what was coming next, that wasn't just surprising. It was a level of raw vulnerability we almost never see from the ultimate point guard. I do know one thing. My wife and my kids are in LA, he said. And I mean, I say this just about every time I talk, but look at the mileage over the past 6 seasons. I started in Oklahoma City first. 6 different cities in 6 years. That isn't a career path. That is a travel montage. Oklahoma City, then Phoenix for 3 hard-fought seasons, a pit stop in Golden State for a year, then San Antonio. It was city after city after city, living out of a suitcase. And through all of it, through every blockbuster trade, every tense free agency decision, and every brand new locker room dynamic, Jada, Chris II, and Cameron stayed anchored in Los Angeles, waiting for him to finally come home. My wife and my kids have been in LA all 6 of those years, he told reporters, the fatigue visible in his eyes. So that's tough. That wears on you. And then he dropped the line that really put the whole situation into perspective. The thing that made everybody listening understand that family wasn't just a nice PR talking point for Chris Paul. It wasn't something he said just because it sounded good on a podcast. It was the foundation of absolutely everything. I love to play basketball, but I love my kids and my family more. By November of 2025, sources confirmed what the streets already suspected. This was the end game. This was going to be Chris Paul's last season. The 12-time All-Star, the 11-time All-NBA selection, the 9-time All-Defensive Nightmare, the member of the NBA's 75th anniversary team was ready to hang it up after one final ride. The plan was simple, almost poetic. Play out the season in LA, soak in the adoration from the fans, tuck his kids into bed every single night after the game, and walk away on his own terms with his head held high. But hold on, because here is where the script took a turn that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, saw coming. Because what was supposed to be a beautiful farewell tour morphed into one of the ugliest, most disrespectful endings to a Hall of Fame career that the NBA has ever witnessed. And to understand how it all fell apart so spectacularly, we need to take a hard look at what really went down inside that Clippers locker room. The Clippers chaos and the infamous 3 a.m. dismissal. Now, let's set the stage, because context is everything here. It is late November 2025, and the Los Angeles Clippers are in absolute freefall. We are talking about a team that stumbled out of the gate and face-planted straight into the hardwood with a horrific 6-20 start to the season. 6 wins, 20 losses. That is not just bad basketball. That is historically, embarrassingly bad basketball. That is paper bag over your head territory. And when a team is losing at that kind of rate, when the wheels are coming off the bus and the bus itself is currently engulfed in flames, tensions inside that locker room start to boil over in ways that no amount of media training can contain. Now, here is the thing about Chris Paul that everybody who has ever shared a jersey with him already knows full well. The man is vocal. He is intense. He is absolutely relentless in his pursuit of perfection. He demands excellence from every single person around him, from the max contract superstars to the guys at the end of the bench, and from the head coach down to the training staff. And here is the kicker. He does not care one bit if that aggressive approach rubs people the wrong way. It is the very same abrasive quality that made him the president of the NBA Players Association for nearly a decade, running the show from 2013 all the way to 2021. It is the very same quality that allowed him to walk into any locker room in America and command instant respect from everyone in the building. But it is also the very same quality that, in this particular situation, with this particular sinking ship of a team, created a friction so intense that it burned the entire house to the ground. Reports indicate that tensions escalated dramatically between Paul and head coach Tyronn Lue, along with associate head coach Jeff Van Gundy, over everything under the sun. They were clashing over team strategies, practice schedules, defensive schemes, and what was described as Chris Paul's overly critical tone toward both the players and the coaching staff. Now, keep in mind, the Clippers didn't just have some rookie coaching staff you could push around. This was a veteran-heavy war room that included Ty Lue, Jeff Van Gundy, Brian Shaw, and Larry Drew. These are men who have coached at the highest levels of professional basketball for decades. They've seen it all. So when Chris Paul started pushing for more grueling practices, calling for additional team meetings, and offering his own strategic suggestions that sometimes directly contradicted what the coaches had already put in place, let's just say some of those coaches didn't just fail to appreciate it, they resented it deeply. Kendrick Perkins, the former NBA center who has never been one to bite his tongue or sugarcoat a messy situation, went on the Road Trippin' podcast and dropped a bomb. He revealed what he had been hearing from his sources inside the Clippers organization, and what he said painted a picture that was far more damning than anything the public had heard up to that point. He was doing stuff behind Ty Lue's back, going to players, whispering, saying things and causing turmoil. Now, think about the weight of what Perkins is saying right there. Really think about it. Chris Paul, the man who was brought into this organization specifically to be the veteran mentor, the stabilizer, he was allegedly being the arsonist. Instead of steadying the ship, reports suggest he was the one poking holes in the hull. If those whispers were true, it wasn't just a clash of styles, it was a mutiny. And in the NBA, when you come for the king, or in this case, the head coach, you better not miss. You bring a guy in to be the coach's right-hand man, the extension of authority on the floor, but instead, he decides to go rogue. We're talking about a guy allegedly sneaking around behind the head coach's back, whispering in players' ears and giving them a completely different battle plan than what the staff drew up in the huddle. And doing this when the team is already spiraling, that is a recipe for absolute catastrophe. And here is the kicker, the part that makes your stomach turn. This wasn't a championship squad having a bad week. This team was already underwater, gasping for air. They were sitting at a humiliating record of 6 wins and 20 losses. When you are bleeding out like that, the last thing you need is a civil war between your veteran general and the coaching staff. But according to Kendrick Perkins, that is exactly the kind of sabotage happening behind closed doors. You bring in a legend to stabilize the ship, right? You pay him to be an extension of the coach, a steady hand on the wheel. You need a voice of reason in that locker room. Instead, what they got was a voice of dissent, a poison in the water supply. And folks, that right there, that is the heartbeat of this entire mess. The Clippers signed Chris Paul to be the calm in the storm, the wise sage who could put his arm around the rookies and back up the coaches when the seas got rough. But instead of a mentor, they got a micromanager. A Hall of Famer who couldn't help but see flaws in the system and felt a divine compulsion to fix them, even though nobody asked him to play savior. Perkins dropped a bomb with a specific, revealing story that paints a brutal picture of what was actually going down on the hardwood. Picture this. They are on the road. Hostile territory. But hey, they are actually playing well. Up by double digits. Life is good, right? Everything is clicking. The coaches can finally breathe. The game plan is working. But then, because this is the NBA, the momentum shifts. The other team wakes up and goes on a run. I think it was Memphis coming back to haunt them. Or maybe it was Dallas. Honestly, it doesn't matter who the opponent was, the disaster was internal. Coach Van Gundy sees the bleeding and calls a specific defensive scheme to stop the run. The lead is shrinking, the pressure is mounting, the Clippers burn a timeout to stop the bleeding. Van Gundy gets the whiteboard out. He is drawing up a very specific coverage, looking a young player dead in the eye and telling him exactly where to be when the buzzer sounds. It is simple stuff. Coach calls the play. Players run the play. That is how organized sports work. They break the huddle ready to execute. But before they can even get set, Chris Paul slides over to the young rookie and whispers, "No, forget that. You need to do this instead." Can you believe the audacity? Paul literally vetoed the coach's orders in real time. He walked up to a kid fresh out of the huddle and told him to run a completely different scheme than the one Van Gundy just spent the entire time out drawing up. So, what happens? The kid listens to the legend, does what Chris Paul says, and he gets absolutely roasted on defense. Just cooked. And look, you can't even blame the rookie. Why wouldn't he listen? You have a future first ballot Hall of Famer, a 12-time All-Star, the point god himself telling you what to do. You listen to that guy. But the result? Total disaster. The player got embarrassed, the lead vanished into thin air, and the coaching staff is standing on the sideline looking like idiots, wondering why their game plan is being shredded by their own captain. Now, if this happened once, maybe you forgive it, but Perkins made it clear. This wasn't a glitch. This was the operating system. When asked if the team had tried to check him on this, if they had warned him, Perkins didn't even blink. Oh, absolutely. They had meetings. Multiple meetings. And in the NBA, multiple usually means they were sick and tired of talking about it. We are talking about several sit-downs, several warnings, several uncomfortable conversations behind closed doors. The staff sat Chris Paul down, looked him in the eye, and said, "This has to stop." And yet, the hijacking continued. Then the details started leaking about a confrontation on the team plane. Van Gundy finally snapped and accused Paul of overstepping. Allegedly, Paul was trying to tell Kawhi Leonard, how to switch on defense against Klay Thompson during a loss to the Mavericks, contradicting the coaches again. Paul admitted he gave input, but denied changing assignments. But let's be real at that point. It doesn't matter who said what. The trust? It was gone, shattered into a million pieces. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was nuked. So, inevitably, the hammer dropped on December 3rd, 2025, at 3 o'clock in the morning, while the team is on the road, miles away from Los Angeles. The Clippers pulled the trigger. No warning, no thanks for the memories, no courtesy call to let him get his affairs in order. Just a cold message delivered in the dead of night, telling a 21-year veteran, a legend of the game, to pack his bags and get out. Arguably the most popular player in franchise history, treated like a temp worker caught stealing office supplies. And let me tell you, Stephen A. Smith did not take this lightly. When the news broke, Stephen A. went nuclear on his radio show. He couldn't believe this went down in the middle of the night. The wee hours of the morning, we are talking about Chris Paul, one of the greatest point guards to ever lace them up. And Stephen A. wasn't just mad about the decision, he was furious about the execution. It was the sheer lack of class, the total absence of professional courtesy, the disrespect shown to a man who gave the prime years of his life to that organization is staggering. You don't do a legend like that. You let him fly home. You get back to LA. You call him into the office like men, and you work out a buyout. That is the part that cuts deep. You don't send a Hall of Famer home at 3 a.m. like he is some undrafted rookie who missed curfew. You wait until the wheels touch down in Los Angeles. You sit him down in a plush chair, face to face, man to man. You treat him with the dignity that 21 years of blood, sweat, and tears deserves. You let him walk out with his head high. After 21 freaking years in the league, you owe him that much. You just don't do him dirty like that. Chris Paul finally broke his silence on December 10th, calling the whole situation crazy. You could hear the hurt in his voice, telling reporters he never wanted it to end in a mess like this. But in the NBA, loyalty is just a word on a jersey. The man came home for a fairy tale ending, not a tragedy. He specifically picked the Clippers so he could clock out of the arena and drive straight to his family during what was supposed to be his final victory lap in the league. But instead of the Kobe Bryant-style farewell tour he had played out in his head, instead of the roaring standing ovations, the tear-jerking tribute videos on the Jumbotron, and the flowers at center court, he got a pink slip delivered in the dead of night like he was some 10-day contract rookie who meant absolutely nothing to that franchise. It was supposed to be the final chapter of a legend. Instead, it became a crime scene, and that cold-blooded disrespect became the real reason he walked away. So, after the Clippers unceremoniously kicked Chris Paul to the curb in early December, the entire basketball world held its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The questions were flying faster than a fast break. Would another team step up and snag him off the waiver wire? Would a legitimate contender make the call that could change the playoff picture? You look at the landscape, and you have to ask, who wouldn't want one of the smartest basketball minds in history on their bench? Specifically, all eyes turned to the purple and gold, a playoff push with the Los Angeles Lakers, the team where his lifelong friend and banana boat brother, LeBron James, was still lacing them up. It felt written in the stars, give Chris Paul one last legitimate shot at that elusive championship ring that had slipped through his fingers for his entire career. But the answer to every single one of those burning questions turned out to be a flat, heartbreaking no. And the silence from the league tells you everything you need to know about why Chris Paul ultimately looked in the mirror and decided to hang up his sneakers for good. On February 4th, 2026, nearly 2 months after the Clippers sent him packing, they officially traded Chris Paul to the Toronto Raptors as part of a massive 3-team salary dump deal. Now, let's cut through the PR spin and be absolutely clear about what this trade actually was. The Toronto Raptors did not want Chris Paul, the legendary point guard. They didn't want the leader, the icon, or the playmaker. They wanted the math. They wanted the financial flexibility and the cap space gymnastics that came with moving a massive expiring salary around the board. In this transaction, Chris Paul was reduced to nothing more than a financial instrument, a contract to be shuffled across a desk, a line item on a balance sheet, and the worst part is, everybody involved knew it. Paul never even bothered to report to Toronto. He didn't book a flight to Canada. He didn't even look at a Raptors jersey, let alone put one on. He didn't show up for a single practice or a morning shoot-around. He didn't do any of the things a player with a fire left in his belly would do because the fire was already out. And on February 13th, 2026, just 9 days after the trade was papered, the Toronto Raptors waived him, setting him free into the void. Hours later, Chris Paul opened up his Instagram account and finally broke his silence, telling the entire world what we had all been waiting and dreading to hear. In his retirement statement, the point guard didn't hold back. He poured his heart out onto the screen for everybody to see, stripping away the athlete to show the man underneath. He talked about the overwhelming gratitude he felt for a career that spanned more than 21 years, a lifetime in professional sports. He waxed poetic about how basketball had been the very first relationship he ever knew, how his father put the ball in his hands, and how the game became woven into the very DNA of his existence. He preached about the vital importance of showing up, dropping wisdom about how the true leaders and the real fighters in this world understand that just being present, just standing in the fire, is half the battle. But then he got to the gut punch. He peeled back all the layers of fame and accolades and revealed the raw, honest reason behind everything. He wrote that going into this last season, he knew in his soul that he couldn't grind through another 82 games unless he was sleeping in his own bed at home with his family. Those 6 long years away from Los Angeles, living out of suitcases away from his wife Jada, away from his children, that was a heavy tax to pay, and the debt had finally come due. He knew the ride had to end. He said he knew wholeheartedly, without a single shred of doubt, that the best teammate he could be right now was to Jada, Chris II, and Cam. That is it, right there. That is the smoking gun. That is the real reason Chris Paul retired from the NBA. It wasn't the drama with the Clippers front office. It wasn't the coaching staff conflicts or the petty power struggles with Ty Lue and Jeff Van Gundy. It wasn't even the humiliating 3 a.m. dismissal or the degrading salary dump trade to Toronto that treated him like expired inventory. All of that noise was just the ugly backdrop to a decision that Chris Paul had already made in the deepest part of his heart long before any of that mess hit the fan. The man was simply tired of being a visitor in his own family's life. He was exhausted from watching his kids grow up through the pixelated screen of FaceTime calls and text messages. He was done missing the birthdays, the recitals, the moments you can never get back, no matter how many hundreds of millions you make or how many all-star games you start in. Now, let's keep it 100 what the Clippers did and how they mishandled this entire situation. Absolutely slammed the accelerator on his retirement timeline. There is no question about that. They took a graceful exit and turned it into a car crash. When you look at how Lawrence Frank, the Clippers' president of basketball operations, managed this entire debacle, it is hard not to feel a level of disgust. This is the same Lawrence Frank who had the nerve to release a carefully crafted public statement saying the organization was parting ways with Chris Paul, claiming they were grateful for his impact, and spinning a narrative that no one was blaming him for the team's failures. Pure corporate speak at its finest. Stephen A. Smith, never one to let a bogus statement slide, had something very pointed and very loud to say about that. Oh, shut the hell up. I don't want to hear that nonsense from Lawrence Frank. He's always got a great quote to give, always polished. He's always willing to accept responsibility on a piece of paper. And then came the reality check that cut right through all the public relations garbage. But in real life, it's always somebody else that's paying the price. It's always the player taking the fall. And Stephen A. is dead right about that, because Lawrence Frank has a long, well-documented history of making decisions that look progressively more terrible with every passing year while he stays comfortable in the executive suite. Look at this face. This is the executive who looked at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and decided he was disposable. He packaged Shai with Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round draft picks, and 2 pick swaps just to pair Paul George with Kawhi Leonard. That is the same Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who evolved into an absolute monster, dominating the league and becoming an MVP contender in Oklahoma City. So, what was the return on investment for the Clippers after they sold their soul and mortgaged their entire future? They got 5 years of Kawhi and Paul George sharing the floor and not a single NBA Finals appearance to show for it. 5 years defined by limping off the court, internal bickering, and crushing postseason collapses that broke the fan base. But the front office kept digging the hole deeper. The James Harden blockbuster in October 2023 cost them multiple players plus 4 more picks and swaps. Then came the ultimate insult. Paul George, furious over a contract offer he called a slap in the face, walked away to the Philadelphia 76ers in 2024, leaving the Clippers with absolutely zero compensation in return. Desperate to save face, they traded Norman Powell, who went on to drop 25 a night for the Miami Heat, just to clear space for Bradley Beal and a 40-year-old Chris Paul. You almost have to admire the consistency of these catastrophic decisions, because the Clippers effectively handed the Oklahoma City Thunder a golden ticket to a dynasty through a masterclass in terrible asset management. But hold on, because there is a heartbeat at the center of this mess that we need to talk about. As ugly, toxic, and disrespectful as the situation in Los Angeles became, Chris Paul didn't hang it up because of Lawrence Frank or the suits in the front office. He didn't walk away because Tyronn Lue gave him the silent treatment or because Jeff Van Gundy got in his face on the team plane. Did all that drama happen? Absolutely. Was it a total disaster? 100%. But Chris Paul retired because after 21 years of leaving his blood, sweat, and soul on the hardwood, he was finally ready to give that same fire to the people who actually loved him back. When you zoom out and look at the resume, the sheer magnitude of what this man did is ridiculous. We are talking about 12,502 career assists, sitting second all-time behind only the uncatchable John Stockton, along with 2,728 steals. That is also second in history to Stockton. Throw in 12 All-Star nods, 11 All-NBA selections, 9 All-Defensive teams, and 5 assist titles. He led the league in steals 6 times, a literal NBA record for the most steals crowns in history, and was the 2006 Rookie of the Year. He is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, a member of the NBA's 75th anniversary team, and a guy who won 65% of his clutch games between 2008 and 2022, which is a higher winning percentage than even LeBron James managed. He elevated every single roster he touched, transforming the Hornets into a 56-win juggernaut, turning the Clippers into Lob City contenders, and dragging the Suns to the NBA Finals in 2021. Did he get the ring? No. And yeah, the haters are going to carve that asterisk onto his Hall of Fame bust forever. But a missing piece of jewelry does not erase the fact that Chris Paul was a basketball savant. In his absolute prime, he led the entire league in estimated plus-minus for 6 seasons between 2008 and 2018, with his 2008 campaign ranking as the 6th best single season ever recorded. He walked into the sunset as the only point guard in history with 11 All-NBA selections to go along with 20,000 points and 10,000 assists. By pretty much every advanced metric and statistical model we have, he stands tall as one of the 5 greatest floor generals to ever lace up a pair of sneakers. And when the buzzer sounded for the last time, when the Raptors waved him and the door slammed shut on his playing days, the basketball world finally showed some respect. Commissioner Adam Silver called him a true steward of the game, honoring his legendary competitiveness and obsessive work ethic. LeBron James, his brother from the Banana Boat crew, who has been riding with him since the early 2000s, was the first to salute him, dropping nothing but love and admiration for his longtime friend. Fans from every corner of the globe took a moment to appreciate 2 decades of brilliance from the guy who redefined the point guard position for the modern era. So, when the barbershop debates start heating up and people ask why Chris Paul really called it quits, the answer is simple, but it's also layered with a lot of pain. The simple truth is family. He said it clearly: the best teammate he could be now was to Jada, Chris II, and Cam. The complicated truth involves a franchise that had no clue how to treat a living legend, a coaching staff that couldn't handle one of the fiercest competitors in sports history, and a chain of unfortunate events that turned a victory lap into a clumsy, embarrassing exit that no one should be proud of. That wraps up this story, but don't move a muscle because we are just getting started with the hot takes. Smash one of those cards on your screen right now and stay locked in for more.